Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Genealogy Researching Your Family Tree Week 6 Google Hangout, coming to you live from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. Today, we're putting your questions to Tahisha McCabe and Graham Holton, discussing Week 6 of the course. Please feel free to ask any questions you may have using the Google Hangout question box, and we will do our best to pass along as many of your questions as we can. You can also post your questions on Twitter, use the hashtag FLGenealogy. And now, without further ado, I will hand over to your hosts today, Tahisha and Graham.
Hello, everybody. Nice to nice to not see you, but it's nice to be here at any rate. It's very odd talking to everybody when we can't actually see you all. But, so I'm here, Tahisha, obviously, and Graham's joining me today.
Hello.
Which is wonderful stuff. Before we plunge into the questions, and it's great because we have a lot of those, I just wanted to give a kind of a general overview of the last couple weeks of the course, because it's been a few weeks since we had the last hangout, and touch briefly on what Chris has been up to in her ongoing story. But I know the main interest here is the questions, so we'll go on to those. So the last couple of weeks we've been really focusing on things like adding context to your genealogical research, and getting into things like organizing and communicating your results, and the ever popular referencing of your sources, and all of that is really important. And I know a lot of you have particularly enjoyed the contextualization and adding the family stories into your research, and it's really been great to hear your comments about doing all of that. And again, thank you to all of you who've been adding additional information into the discussion forums. It's really been a massive help. Obviously, we can only give so much information in the articles and on the videos, so having your input is invaluable. But I have to say, for my personal genealogical experience, obviously I need to have the dates and the places, but having the family stories to add on information about occupations and that kind of thing is really a lot of fun. And I'm sure Graham can agree with me that adding those informational bits is quite good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really important. Yeah.
So and Chris's journey, I suppose, is ongoing. A lot of you commented on how sad week 5's storyline in particular was, with the gentleman reflecting on his not being able to continue with his work. Anyway, just so thank you all for continuing to watch that. Chris, as she was saying last Google Hangout, has been continuing her research and has gotten a bit further on it. But I think she did talk about that in the last Google Hangout. So if you're curious about where she's gotten to and you haven't watched that Google Hangout yet, I would suggest going back and doing that, because she gave a long idea of where she's gotten to with that. So, but someone asked actually a question about how long it took her to do that, to do all the research. It was Julie Martin who asked about that, and the answer is I'm not really sure. I know that she started doing the research on the 8-week intro course with me, but that was over a year ago, and she's been continuing to do research ever since. So as far as number of hours, I can't tell you, but maybe Chris will chime in at some point and give us an idea. Although, as many of you have noted, the time flies by when you're doing genealogy, and it's difficult to pin down the hours that you're doing while you're doing them. I know my husband's always like, dinner's ready, come on. I'm like, okay, just a couple more minutes.
Yeah, you totally lose track of all time, I think, when you get tied up into genealogy.
Yeah, definitely. So yes. So so thank you all for continuing to take part, and without further ado, we will launch into questions. Graham's going to give us a bit of rundown on DNA in particular. Lots of questions coming out of the DNA side of things, and I must admit it's not an area that I'm expert in, but Graham's thankfully quite comfortable and experienced in this. So he's gonna do a little talking about that. So, Graham.
Okay, right. Well, we have a question. First of all, question from David Pulley, who's asking generally about testing companies. He's noticed that there's some certain level of controversy about certain companies, some doubts about their reputation, talking about overhype and poor science. This is the first part of his question. So just to look at that, first of all, I feel the problems involved in this have largely been due to overhype rather than poor science. We do know that the scientific basis for the one particular company that has tended to be criticised has been good, but the claims, the hype, the publicity surrounding this has been misleading to a certain extent, and I think that has possibly died down a little now as a result of comment from other geneticists and academics who have made criticisms of that. So moving on, still with David, he's interested to know, how do we select a good testing company? Important question. And secondly, choosing a company that has a comprehensive database that may actually record results for the surname you're interested in. Well, first of all, first part of that then, if you want to choose a testing company, one of the best things to do is to have a look at the ISOG website. ISOG is the International Society of Genetic Genealogy, and there's a vast amount of useful information on their site. And this includes a page devoted to a list of DNA testing companies. And this gives comparative information on various companies, what tests they provide, whether they hold databases and all that type of thing. So have a good look at that. And secondly, of course, have a good look at their own websites. Try and get an idea of the services they provide, what sort of feedback and assistance is available on the websites, that type of thing. Pricing, of course, could be an issue as well. So that's the way to go about choosing a company. Always think, of course, what do you want to get out of this? Because the different types of tests, which will give you different types of results from different companies. So think, what is your end result? What are you trying to achieve? And which company and which test is going to meet that need best?
And is it the case, I understand that a number of companies will let you take your test results and then put it onto other companies' databases. Is that true, or am I making that up?
Yes, it is possible to use test results. There are one or two utilities available, which are pretty much independent of the actual companies themselves, which will allow you to upload results. Okay. So, for example, there's a Y-Search, which is actually set up by one of the companies, but it runs independently from their own results database. It's possible to upload YSTR results to that. Another utility is GEDmatch, which will allow you to upload autosomal results.
Oh, right, great. Yeah, so a bit more freedom there. So you're not just locked in, really.
This is an issue. I mean, there's not one unified comprehensive database, so you're sort of dependent on who's tested with who. So it makes it slightly more awkward.
Yeah. So I suppose a good thing to find out would be whether or not the company you're testing with will allow you to take your test results and put it into these utilities.
Yes, I mean, just to make sure that you can download the results in some sort of a raw format or file that can be uploaded elsewhere. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
So just leading on to the last part of David's question, how would you choose a company that has a comprehensive database? We've just sort of touched on that, really. Currently, for Y testing, Family Tree DNA has the largest database of tests from Y results. But otherwise, as I say, there are these utilities that are worth making use of. Okay, we'll move on to the next question then. We have one from Amanda Brown, who's questioning that the limitations of results that might be available, because obviously only people that have tested will have results available. So she's wondering, how would she be able to find out the likely surname for her grandfather if somebody from his line has not been tested? Right, the issue with this is it doesn't matter if somebody fairly close has not been tested, because the fact that the STRs change relatively little in the Y chromosome over many hundreds of years or several hundreds of years, that even if somebody fairly distantly or, with a common ancestor several hundred years ago has tested, this is still an indication and will still be a similar, relatively similar STR test result. And that will still give an indication, or is likely to give an indication, what the possible surname of the grandfather might be. So it's not a major problem, that really.
Good. Start digging people up.
Yes, well, I haven't quite got into that yet.
Don't,
No.
don't do that.
Okay, and she's also saying surely it only works for unusual surnames. Now, an unusual surname can be beneficial, or it can have its downside as well. Sometimes if you have a very unusual surname, you may find that nobody or almost nobody of that surname is actually tested.
Yeah.
So there's very little there for you actually to match up with. On the other hand, if there are a reasonable number of tested, and it can be quite helpful and to sort of narrow down your route of further research. And finally, she says, what if she links into the name Smith? Right, okay, well, obviously there's going to could well be many hundreds of Smith matches, but it's quite possible that there may be smaller groupings or subgroupings of Smiths.
Yeah.
Because the STR results for a certain group of Smiths come much more closely matched, then they can be grouped in a genetic grouping. So, for example, Smiths from a particular part of the world may have a common ancestry in a small geographical location. They may have quite closely matching STR results, and they might be grouped together in the test results.
Right. Yeah, which I could see would be really quite useful.
So,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's, again, there's sort of ways around that.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. And if STRs isn't meaning anything, do you go to the ISOG website and have a look for STR?
Right. Now we come on to a question from Jan Emerson, talking about females testing. What information could a female expect to gain from the various tests? So just to summarize who can take which test, females can take a mitochondrial DNA test or an autosomal DNA test, but not a Y-DNA test. So they can still take 2 out of the 3 tests. So just to give you an idea of what's available, the possibilities from these tests, the mitochondrial test is good for information on early origins, early ancestral origins. So we're really talking about the prehistorical period here, almost anthropology really. So it tends to be good for that. When we're talking about the actual historical period, it's not quite so helpful, but it can be useful in some cases in disproving connections.
Okay. Yeah.
It's better in that way than actually proving connections. It's rarely particularly useful in the period over the last few centuries in proving connections.
Which is, of course, what we're interested in for genealogy,
Yes,
which is
so
why
for
the Y test
genealogical
is
purposes. The Y, of course, changes a little more frequently than the mitochondrial DNA, and so that's more useful from our point of view. The other test that females can take, of course, is the autosomal test, and that can be quite helpful, and we're really talking about a much more recent period here. Tends to look for or reliably report results back about 5 or 6 generations.
Right.
So it can identify relatives who match up with a common ancestor about 5 generations back.
Yeah, which is pretty exciting, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. So we're talking there about probably a couple of 100 years on average, something like that nature. Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a non-sex-based test, which is, you know, why males and females can take it. So and just coming back to this female question, Julie Martin asked a number of questions, but one of those was asking if I've had DNA testing, and if I've used DNA testing in any research on my own. And so far, I've not actually done it because I tend to research my mom's line, and so I know a lot about that line. So the mitochondrial wasn't particularly of interest to me, but now with the autosomal coming up and a real use, my mom and I are going to do the autosomal in the next month or so, and we're actually curious about, I suppose, well, as you're saying, it will go back 5 generations or so, potentially. So if I do the test and my mom does the test, I mean, is that a real plus, or better just to have my mom do the test, or what do you think about that?
Yes, it is a plus because, of course, if you're taking somebody a generation further back, you're going to get closer to those more distant lines. So yes, it definitely is worthwhile.
Okay, great.
And obviously yourself, Tiki, is going to look at your father's lines as
line.
well. So it's definitely worthwhile. Yes. I should maybe add a little bit more about the 5 to 6 generation thing. It's generally reckoned that there's a fair bit of confidence at matching up at that distance in time, but it is possible. And I mean, autosomal testing is it's a fairly new test. It's still being developed, and we're still getting experience of results coming through from this. But I mean, it is possible for segments of DNA to be passed down from further back than that.
Right.
So, I mean, if you do find you get results back and you see matches with a decent length of segment, they're not necessarily going to be as close as that. There are possibilities that there could be links further back.
Okay.
But to be confident and to say too much about that, we still need to build up more experience, really. On this issue. Yeah. All
right. No, that's fair warning. And then obviously build up the databases and the number of results and all those kinds of things. So I suppose that's the whole thing about DNA. It's a growing and ever changing and new.
Very much so, yes. We've still a long way to go with it, I think.
So So watch this space. Great.
I think we have one more question on DNA here. Stephen Yeoman has said it would be helpful to have some actual real case studies by people who have had genealogical problems that have been solved as a result of DNA testing. I could point out that there was one case study mentioned in the course in week 4 of the course. We did talk about Lee MacDonald, who was involved in our Battle of Bannockburn Family History project. He tested, and because of extensive testing that the Clan Donald had done over the last few years, he was able to identify a particular historical individual that he descended from, who was living around about the middle of the 16th century.
Wow. Cool.
So it's still quite far back for many people, but coming more and more recent, and as more and more testing is done, we discover more about SNPs and so on, which is the reason he was able to identify that ancestor. It's likely that we will be able to, in some cases, find known ancestors from just a few hundred years ago, when we maybe don't have the documentary evidence. So it's certainly a good point about case studies, and maybe something that the next version of this course we might be able to try and include at least another 1 or 2.
Always good to know how things are working. Yes. All right. Excellent. Well, we see if we get anything in off the Google Hangout forums about DNA, but other questions going on here as well. Let's see. yeah, a couple of people asking the difficult questions about how to find people who have vanished. Oh yes, it's the Ouija board question. Yeah, Miriam Griffith was asking about how to find people who vanished from the location or who suddenly appeared, seemingly from out of nowhere, and you can't track them back or track them forward, and particularly if the names are common. And yes, this is a difficult thing. One of the other students on the course had some good ideas. Elizabeth Krause was saying, look at if you have siblings, look at the sibling life events, and I've actually found people on passenger lists who one person of the family has vanished, but I've been able to still keep track of other people in the family, and then see people going off on passenger lists and then coming back, and thought, maybe they're visiting family members, and
Yes.
indeed that ended up then being the case. This vanished person, that's who they were going to go visit, that kind of thing. So I think partially it goes back to using the fan club, so using the family, neighbor, and associates ideas that we talked about on, I think it was week 2. So you might go back and have a look at some of those links on that. And yeah, as Elizabeth's saying, working sideways as well. I would think about, are there any clues whatsoever that you can come up with? Occupation, place of birth, and maybe think about searching. Again, if you're not finding people in the same country where they always have been, look, and you think maybe they've immigrated, just go off and look at potential countries that they might have immigrated to. I have done that, and sometimes you don't find anything, but every once in a while somebody pops up. Although often that works better if it's more of a uncommon name than a common name. But it's definitely some of the difficult things. I know you have lots of family members who've moved about and vanished and come up. Any
You
thoughts
certainly
about?
have, yeah. I was just going to say, in the UK, obviously moving between Scotland and England as well, because of their completely different civil registration systems and so on, and people could have moved over the border, perhaps for a short period of time.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the events might have taken place there, and they might have moved back to their original country.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So just a reminder to look everywhere, and not think, oh no, they were never in Scotland or they were never in England, because they might have moved for work or whatever. That's a good one. Jean Kay was talking about a question. Tips for getting past a complete blank would be good. Well, again, I suppose some of those issues, ideas that we were just talking about. But I certainly have people on my tree who, I know, I don't know names, but I know the father was born in Missouri and the mother was born in Missouri, but I don't know anything more than that, except that the surname is probably Anderson. I just keep hoping that I'll find some information within the family, a will or family letters or church records or something that will give me a clue for where to go. But at the moment, I'm totally stuck on that line because there's just nowhere else for me to go.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's important to be persistent, really, to keep looking, keep coming back and looking again, even just using Google. There are so many records out there that are not online yet. More and more is being digitized, more and more is being indexed. I had a fairly recent example in one of my own families. I didn't know the place of baptism of one of my ancestors in the middle of the 18th century, and it was an impossible task to search all the parishes in the county. I knew the county he was born in from the census records. It was a very large number of parishes, impossible to search, and you're really dependent on somebody actually indexing these, and eventually sometime in the future making an index available, and that did happen. And I found this individual who I've been seeking for probably about 30 years.
That was a great moment.
It was
a very good moment. Break out the champagne. Yeah. And I suppose that particularly if you're reliant on online resources, you are, as Graham said, quite reliant on indexes. But if you can get to a county record office or a county archive, local archive, I do know that some of those have indexes to birth baptism that aren't available online. One of my students has just been using one for an assessment that she's turned in and has found stuff that we didn't know about because it wasn't online. And suddenly it's like, oh, that's great. But she had gone to that archive and there it was. So, yeah. So just, I guess, was another reminder that not everything's online. So you might have to go take a trip or go on holiday or do some of those things. Let's see. Marie Tyree was just asking about, in one of the videos I was talking about note-taking software. By that, actually I didn't need Microsoft Word, although I certainly use Microsoft Word quite a bit. A lot of times I'll cut and paste things as I'm in the process of doing research and into a Microsoft Word document. And then at the end of my session, go back and round things up. But really by that, I was more particularly talking about things like EndNote and those types of software products. And those are really quite good. So that's what I meant by that. Let's see. Kathy Lewis was asking about illegitimate 19th century ancestors for England. A number of places where you can look for this, but I would suggest on week 1, the Google Hangout, somebody else had asked about illegitimate ancestors and how to find information. And I found a great article written by a Dutch genealogist on searching for illegitimate ancestors. So I would suggest going back to that step 1.18 and having a look at, download that list of questions and answers and find that link. And she did a phenomenal job writing that article. And really, I can't say much more than that. But I've just put in, would you say, church session minutes, bastardy court records?
Yeah, that's right. In Scotland, particularly Kirk Session, it's likely to have that sort of information. England, bastardy court records, what I had in mind, yes. Perhaps some other poor law records in England may have mention of illegitimate children and so on. These are the type of sources. Obviously, it's a challenging issue. Sometimes there's just no way of finding out. And there's always a good consideration of where the mother was 8 to 9 months beforehand, and think about who was around, although sometimes that's not not really much help. But no, there's no doubt that illegitimacy can be quite difficult. Trying to find a father. So, yes. Of course, there's also genetic genealogy. Again, come back to that again. It can sometimes answer issues like that.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things you were talking about was the sons being apprenticed, and could a missing parent arrange for apprenticeships? Well, certainly they could have. If there was a bit of support needing to go on or something like that, I suppose the father could arrange for an apprenticeship to be taken care of. Thing about apprenticeships, there were contracts between the master and the parent, so usually the father, so that you might actually, depending on the time period and when what's available, have a look at the apprentice records for that particular area, which some of them exist and some don't. So, let's see here. Got questions coming up from the Hangout application. Yeah. Somebody's asking about, will the course run again very soon? Yes, this is actually some great questions to answer about the MOOC running again, and then will it remain available, the materials that you've been looking at. And yes, my understanding is that if as long as you don't click on the leave this course link, don't do that, you will remain accessible. The course will remain accessible. I did a course last summer on Richard III. It was a fabulous course. Highly recommend that. And I still have access to those course materials. I just need to go back in and look at them. Obviously, the discussion forums aren't active really and that kind of thing, but you can go back and read things. So yeah, things will remain online for the near future, the far future. As far as running again very soon, yeah, I think it probably will run again in the summertime. We're still to work out the exact timing of it, but what I'm trying to do is calculate back from the holiday week that I'm taking in September. So probably looking at early July, I would say, but we'll probably come up with another date for that, running again in the next couple of weeks, and that will be advertised again. So yeah, but yeah, no, please recommend the course. It would be great to have lots of folks on the course again, and yeah, just have people take part. So, so Allison, you had another question here, asking about passing on the course resource list or articles from the course. Actually, a lot of those are, the articles are open and can be found on Google. I think I'm right in saying that. So they should be open and accessible anyway to people. I mean, they are copyright protected in that they're, we at the university created them, but I mean, one of the points of doing the MOOC is to pass on knowledge. So yeah, looking over at our course administrator here, who's nodding, yes, it's okay. So yes, that's fine. So people can either look for them through the Google thing by I suppose looking for the title of the article, or you're welcome to pass things on. So. Yeah. So, yeah, and have people sign up for the next running of the MOOC. So let's see here. Yeah. Oh yeah. Ross Bales is asking about documenting areas of sensitivity. Some sensitivity, I suppose. So different people have different sensibilities about some of these issues, and some won't. Yeah, and I yeah, definitely always ask clients that I work with if they're comfortable knowing about things like murders that someone may have committed, or any of these types of issues. You never know what's going to come up. But Ross was in particular asking about how to document adopted children on a family record sheet and on a graphical family tree, recording separations and divorces, documenting common law marriage and same-sex partnerships. Yeah, I know a lot of the tools and the paperwork are still using more traditional wording like husband and wife, that kind of thing. Because of the way the course format and the uploading style has worked, the family group sheet that we made available for download for our courses, we make that available in, I think it's either Microsoft Excel or Word doc format, so people can actually change things on it to say wife and wife, or adopted child, that kind of thing. But you're not obviously able to do that on the PDF versions. But I would say anything like that, change to reflect your own family's situation. I think that there's something in the back of my head that is saying that there are some standards in how to record adopted children and those types of second marriages, but I'm blanking on what they are at the moment. Do you remember, Graham?
I'm really not very sure on that area. There are some conventions in recording medical family history in the form of family trees, and I think they have some ruling there about how to record these sort of things.
Right,
It might
right.
be worth looking at that possibly.
Okay, yeah, so
Yeah.
maybe, yeah. What I'll try doing is having a look around, and if I can find something that looks good, I'll add it to the list of sources that you can download, the very last step, and try adding that onto that list. So, but it's a great question, and obviously most families have non-traditional relationships and adoptions and that kind of thing going on. So it's a good thing to know about. So, yeah, right. We've got about five minutes left and so many questions. Yeah, just having, let's see, legitimacy. Oh, should we talk about, you want to talk about the,
Yeah, question from Adrian Hawthorne. Would you consider the best method for storing official records? This is obviously in your own personal collection. So whether to keep official records with the family file or keep them separately. So meaning, would you keep all birth certificates in a folder, all marriage? I mean, different people have different ways, very many different ways of doing this, and it's really up to your own personal choice at the end of the day. I mean, my view would be that you should keep the official records separate. So yes, all birth certificates together, all marriage certificates together, and so on. And have them in some sort of order that you can, if necessary, try and replicate a search. Because if you put them with the family file, you're sort of prejudging the case, and you always need to review your decisions and conclusions, I think, in genealogy as you go along in the light of new evidence. So it's good to be able to recreate a search that you might have done, so you can go back to the original records, which you have copies of in your own collection, and go through the process again. But I mean, if you're really organised, you would have an index of these things. You'd have a family file with a reference to the original source. Say, for example, a birth certificate at a certain reference number within your file of birth certificates. So that's what I would recommend. He follows up saying, is it better to record a birth certificate as B1 with family name, such as Joe Bloggs, the dates B1, or record it as Joe Bloggs Doc 1 within family file, for instance? Right. Yeah, I would say record it with the name, probably the date, and then reference. Would be the way to do that, I would suggest.
Yeah, I mean, my personal how I have things is by type. So I have all the birth certificates together and marriage certificates and census records and that kind of thing in date format. So for me the earliest ones are arranged first, then going back in time. And how I find those is look on my family tree software and go, oh right, that person was born in October of 1867, so that means that I can look through my file and find the 1867 ones fairly readily, easily. But yeah, it's all too easy to decide that a marriage certificate that you found actually relates to a particular couple, and you may come back and having found another one with another source that's come up and realize that you've actually got the wrong couple, and you decided. So that's the keeping your options open and reviewing material. Somebody was asking about Chris, and she was talking about going back and reviewing her material and her research choices, and that's some of the things that she was talking about, meaning when she said that. Sorry, I can't remember who asked that particular question. But I think, that so what she was wanting to do was go back and just look over her, the printouts of her trees and charts, and just to see if there's any gaps. Does she have any marriage things that are just blank, and it's like, oh right, I haven't found the marriage for that couple, I need to go back and look at that. Or maybe she's typed something in wrong and has somebody dying or being born before the parents, or that kind of thing. And then certainly slip-ups can happen like that. So.
Yeah.
That's I think really what she meant by reviewing, and I'm sure she'll tell us if we're wrong about that. So yeah, so we're coming up to the end of our time, but I really just wanted to say a thank you to everybody who's taken part yet again. I mean, you've all been phenomenal and really supported one another incredibly well, and say thank you to Graham for helping out, and just everybody on the course team as well. I'm really glad that so many of you have had a good experience, and it's been fun to see those of you who've chosen to get the end of course certificates, tweeting about those and putting them up on your profiles. So that's been a great thing to see as well. So yeah, so any questions, obviously let us know. We'll continue to monitor the discussion forums for a while, and yeah, we'll wrap up with an email sort of midweek of next week. So, and yeah, please recommend the course if you enjoyed it, and we'll look forward to seeing you back in another course through FutureLearn or with ourselves at some point. So thanks so much for taking part.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Tisha and Graham, and thank you to everyone who participated and tuned in today. To all those watching, thank you for all your comments and feedback during the past 6 weeks. We hope you enjoyed the course as much as we enjoyed creating it for you. From everyone here in Glasgow, thank you and goodbye.